الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغه مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفتن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود فطر الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته وغتدى بالصخور ميدان أرضه أول الدين معرفته. Dearest Mu'mineen, Mu'minat, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is my honor to have the opportunity once again on this Sunday to discuss our Nahjul Balagha Sermon 1 discussion, which we are still involved in. We have moved into the topic of creation, which is the second fourth of the subjects that are discussed in the Nahjul Balagha. And the first topic had more to do with the properties or the qualities, features that we need to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has been, of course, an intense discussion because the person who is speaking and whom we are trying to understand is none other than Amir al-Mu'mineen, Mawla Kainat Ali ibn Abi Talib, salatu wassalamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. With valuable feedback from our audience and from the dear respected members who have mentioned very important things. One thing is, let's slow it down a bit. So I thought that I would try and slow it down so that we can ponder and reflect upon each point, which means I've selected about 9 phrases from this creation topic here to discuss today. Another very important suggestion was about the practical relevance of what we talk about and how we can strive to implement it in our lives. And I think going from step 1 to step 2, which means theory to practical, is always something that's hard to implement because there's a lot of unknowns. And as we actually implement things that we've learned, for example, in school, you learn about theory and then you go on to practical. So implementing that is sometimes not very obvious. In a lot of the chemistry that might have been taught in formulas, it might not be readily apparent how we are going to implement that in the chemistry lab, or what we learn in the pathology books or clinical medicine books, how we're going to implement that when patient care. When it comes to Ma'rifat Tawheed, we see that understanding Allah and His qualities is very abstractly theoretical, metaphysical, and not something that perhaps we consider as concrete, but actually it's the fundamentals of all of our practical application of anything we do in life. Because anything we choose to do practically in life would have to have a reason behind it. Every action we commit has a reason behind it. The reason behind the actions we commit, we sometimes call motivation, we call will. Any action, be it you are having breakfast, be it you are going to work, you are talking to a friend, assisting a family member, buying a gift, eating food, watching television, anything you do whatsoever at any moment in your day is based upon something you desire to do, wanted to do, motivated, willed, whichever word becomes suitable at that time. So if we say that everything you are doing is for a reason, whether you know it or not, there is a reason behind it. Then that reason, what is the reason for everything you do? Well, the reason for everything you do is based upon what you like and what you dislike. We become a collection of likes and dislikes that we use to express to the world. So what we see is that in human nature, we define ourselves and our being by what we like and dislike. This is something that we will observe at a very young age. You will see the teenager or the youngster on social media showing their likes and dislikes, their opinions when it comes to any video they see, any post, when it comes to food they eat. I like this, I don't like that. When it comes to entertainment, they will tell you, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, and sports as well. because that's what really defines us, or one aspect of us. Your likes and dislikes, and what are your likes and dislikes based on? So we're moving backwards. Your actions are based on your motivations, which are based on your likes and dislikes, which are based upon your marifat tawheed or marifat nafs. That means that if I am looking at my nafs and liking what I like and dislike because of my inner instincts, then I am following my own desires. If I'm tuning, controlling, reining in my likes and dislikes to what Allah likes and dislikes, then I am actually leading my life according to Marifat Tawheed. So the purpose of Marifat Tawheed is to see what Allah likes and dislikes, because what happens is it is very difficult to know him. And this is what we are seeing in Nahjul Balagha. In the beginning, we are seeing, yes, it is difficult to know him, but he has clearly stated what he likes and dislikes, although he does not like and dislike like as we do, nor is it with a certain, emotional compulsion like we do, nor is it with knowing why we like or dislike something. Rather, it is infinite wisdom and knowledge with which he has chosen what is better and what is not for us. So when we say what he likes, that means what is better for us. When we say what he dislikes, that means what is not good for us. So we are learning it through him as a child learns through their parents what is right and wrong. In that sense, it's very applicable. So I just wanted to start with that so that there is an understanding that as we learn more about Allah, it should actually be implemented in everything we're doing. Because what happens is when we say applications, and I try to give the example of applications on your computer. If, for example, we use a Windows-based computer, if I may use that example, that's what I have experience with more, then I would say that on your computer, you have applications as well. And those applications are run and you do practical things with them, I suppose. On the other hand, your applications do not run without an operating software. And the operating software you may call Windows. So Windows 11 has just come out. That is the operating software. Your Marifat of Tawheed is your operating software. All applications are put upon this. So we are not talking about practical applications, do this, do that. We are talking about the actual installation of the operating software that will allow you to know which applications to download and install, which ones not to, what to do, what not to do, what to like, what not to like, what to refrain from, where to go. So actually, it's very much a practical topic, because all practical applications are based on this. It's just that it is hidden under the application, so we may not realize its significance. Now, I just wanted to spend that much time on that, so I'll move on and we'll take a look at some of the verses. I will leave the last 5 to 10 minutes for a little more on some ahadiths that do have more perhaps application, and we'll talk about that. It does become dry, so great suggestions from people to mix things up a bit and to add a little bit more about what Amir al-Mu'mineen has said in our discussion. So I will be doing that. And moving forward, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ansha al-khalqa insha'an. So, this is a very, very short phrase. And what's happened is, the translations you'll see me taking are from one of our English translations that is out there. There's a few common ones. And the English translations, the more they explain what the phrase is saying, the more they happen to include the true meaning. However, Arabic has such great eloquence, as it is such an ancient language, and the older a language is, the more applications there are for each word, because over centuries human beings are applying words in different ways. And so the older a language, the more you'll find there's depth in it. And that's why when we look at Arabic, the depth is very, very deep indeed. And when it comes to understanding it, we probably need a lot more explanation. The initial translation I've given there is from QuranAlislam.org. QuranAlislam.org is a great collection of some of our books by our scholars from centuries and contemporary ones as well as centuries ago. So, that's the standard translation, which I prefer to rely on because esteemed scholars have used those translation, and I don't want to put in my own words. But in italicized below, I've added in, kind of my version of it, you could say. And what I've done in my translation is based upon looking at each word in probably 5 or 6 different Arabic dictionaries to see how the word has been used. And then also taking advantage of the Urdu translation by by Mufti Jafar Hussain. Mufti Jafar Hussain, Allahu Maqamahu, has written one of the greatest translations that we'll find in languages and in Urdu, and it's incredible. And so it's one of my favorites. And in that you will, from the Urdu category, and that I've taken advantage of that as well. So you may see me with the italicized at the bottom, just to explain the PowerPoint. Ansha al-khalqa insha'an, he first initiated the concept of creation. You see, by slightly changing the words a bit, I've tried to, show one meaning in here that maybe wasn't coming up. And what that means is that although it can be inferred from the first translation, but here it becomes a little more obvious, he first initiated the concept of creation. That to me is very, very mind-blowing. The idea that creation itself, because before he created, there was no creation. So it was not in existence. And therefore, when he wanted to make creation, then there is a concept of creation that he comes up with. And that is what he implements. By comes up with, I don't mean comes up with like we come up with, but rather something that was not in existence now comes into existence, which means that he is called Ahsanul Khaliqeen. He is the greatest of creators. He is the best of creators. So creating in itself, which is a power, it is an ability that he has brought into being. He can infuse it into anybody he wishes. Could he put it into another being? Certainly. We see Hazrat Isa, alayhi salam, saying, Inni akhluqu lakum min at-tin. When we look at Surah, for example, Surah Al Imran, and we see him saying to his people, and Hazrat Isa alayhi salam said to his people, Inni akhluqu lakum min at-tin ka hay'ati at-tayr. I will create for you from the clay a bird. So Hazrat Isa, who is a prophet, is daring to use the word create. By daring, I mean it is a word that we tend to use only for Allah. So how would somebody who has come to explain Allah use the word create for himself? He is attributing the action to himself. I have come to create for you from clay these birds. And we know in our tafsir that the verse is alluding to the time when Hazrat Isa was creating with his hands birds made of clay, blowing into them, and then they were coming to life and flying away. So that aspect, that power, which Allah infused in Hazrat Isa, is showing his power. On the one hand, we say, what is this doing? Is this taken away from the power of Allah? No, it is certainly not. But what it is doing, it's showing you his power. That means that you have to see that Allah is not insecure in his power. It is not like a king or a leader who has authority over certain things and they decide or they implement some things. And if someone else does, now they are worried about their position of authority. It is not like the one who said, well, if sometimes we attribute many of the actions that the Quran mentions for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We, especially in the Shia faith, attribute actions not to Allah. Rather, we attribute actions to his hujjat. So we say that, no, this was Amirul Mu'mineen who did this. And then one listens to that and one says, well, if Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam is doing everything, or the Ma'soomeen are doing everything, or the Imamul Asr, as-salatu was-salamu alayhi jallahu farajahum, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, is doing everything, then what is Allah doing? And so, that question there, what is Allah doing? That almost makes it sound like now Allah has had to retire and now he doesn't know how to handle his retirement and he's bored. These are not things that we can attribute to Allah. These are human characteristics. It is not like that. However, Allah is the one who initiates creation. He can give that power of bringing things into being if he wants to any extent he wants to. It was a very limited capacity where a bird is being brought to life. That is the only example we see Hazrat Isa alayhi salam implementing, but nonetheless, it is a power. So the fact that he implements it into, or the fact that he infuses it in someone else, is teaching us about Tawheed. It is teaching us that if Allah can infuse the power of creation in a limited capacity, and Hazrat Isa says, as is quoted in the Quran, bi-idhnillah, I am doing it by the izn of Allah, by the permission of Allah, then we see that this attribute is something that Allah can give to somebody. It is not a defining characteristic per se.
Mama,
That means
sorry to interrupt you.
above
Was
that.
it Hazrat Ibrahim? The Waqia that you're describing, or Hazrat Isa?
Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam's vakia with the birds is about when Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam asked, thank you for the question and clarification. Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam's story is when he took one bird or 4 birds and cut them into pieces, mixed them up, put them on different mountains. And he had asked Allah and said that I would like to see, I believe, but I would like to see how you bring death to life and life to death. And so then what we see is that he holds the beaks of each of the birds on a mountain, and all of the pieces of each bird collect together from where he had buried them and become whole birds again. So this was bringing death back into life. Hazrat Isa's is specifically about the birds of clay that he made, and he infused into them the spirit. This is in Surah Ali Imran. And we will see this in approximately verse number in the 40s, perhaps verse 45 or so. So we say that he created the concept, and he created creation in that sense. One time, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, a question is posed to him. And the question that is posed is from someone from a different religion, but he's asking, he was asking the Khalifa of the time this question, and oftentimes when the Khalifa of the time could not answer the question, it was then referred to the door to the city of knowledge, Bab al-Ilm, Ali ibn Abi Talib, as-salatu was-salamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. So we see that the Imam is asked, and what the Imam is asked is, can Allah create other Allahs? If he is all-powerful, he is able to do everything, there must be nothing he cannot do. But there are some things perhaps that we say Allah cannot do, which is a separate discussion. For example, Allah does not do zulm, for example. So, when we talk about creating Allahs, then the man says, well, can Allah create other Allahs? Can he create other gods? No one was able to answer this question up till now, but Amir al-Mu'mineen answers it immediately and says, of course he can. He can create as many gods as he wants to. And then the man says, well, then won't there be multiple gods, and this will become, a polytheistic universe? And Amir al-Mu'mineen says, no, it won't be. And the man says, why not? There will be multiple gods now. Amir al-Mu'mineen says that no, there will not be, because all of the other gods that came into being would have been created by Allah. He would still be their creator. So there is always one origin. It is not to suggest that this has actually happened, but hypothetically speaking is what the question and answer was about. So therefore we see that Allah is a creator, very secure in his creation. وَابْتَدَأَهُ ibtida'an. So, and he commenced it originally. He began all beginnings. So that is incredible, because before him there was no beginning. We who have begun are always going to, at least in this existence, in this mortal existence, I don't know about the next existence, perhaps time may cease to exist in the sense that we know it now in the next realm, in the realm after death, the afterlife. Or perhaps it may be in a different form. So timelessness or time modification, we may be thinking of time in a different way. Because we have begun and we see everything having a beginning and an end, Ar-Rahman the surah of the Quran says, "Kullu man alayha fan," and all that is here will finish. Everything that begins must have an ending. Allah has created things in opposite. So therefore, what begins must end. That is something that is hard for us to accept as children when we see things being lost to us, for example. But as we get older, we learn more and more to accept that endings are inevitable. When there is a beginning, there must be an ending. Things are known by their opposites. The beginning would not be known unless there was an ending. And to have beginnings and endings in his infinite wisdom has allowed us to appreciate things in a way that we would not appreciate if things did not have an end. So because we tend to think of things in time and space, it's very hard. And we pose questions, questions about the beginning, questions about the end. The end, we say, what will it be like, when we're in Jannah? Won't we get bored because there won't be time? Well, maybe there will be some form of time, maybe there won't be time, but boredom is something that actually is not really existing. Rather, it's a state of mind. So that state of mind, are we vulnerable to it or not? Well, I guess we'll see. There's some things that we have remaining to be seen. Of course, we know very little about what's to come. We've been given enough information for the test that we have to pass, but not more than that, because it is a test after all. So what we say is that we say, then why, when did Allah come? So one of the first questions we ask is, then when did Allah begin? There must have been something, a beginning point. That question, saying there must have been something, a beginning point, is because in our universe, in our conceptual understandings, we see everything to have a beginning. It's not possible for us to fathom entities besides that. So I accept that Allah didn't have a beginning, but can I really understand that? Can I really in my mind visualize that in some way, conceptualize that, formulate a concept of it? Not really. What I do is I say, well, everything has a beginning and end, but Allah doesn't, so he's different. So I don't know what it's like to not have a beginning, but I see the beginnings and ends and I distinguish from that. So really it's a way of differentiating, or by default, that which has no beginning is Allah, for example. So he begins all beginnings. And that's why when we begin anything, it's so important to begin it with the beginner of all beginnings. And we don't begin anything without that. And in Tafsir al-Imam al-Hasan al-Askari, as-salatu was-salamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, we see in his discussion on the first phrase, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, we see that it is something that you are beginning, although the actual phrase itself doesn't have the word beginning in it. Sometimes we translate it as beginning in the name of Allah. I begin with the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most beneficent. But what you see it actually having is in the name of Allah. So when we say in the name of Allah, it is implied that we are going to be, if we are beginning an action, it is in the name of Allah. If we are continuing it, if we are ending it, everything we're doing is in the name of Allah. The reason we do that is because he is the origin of all and the beginning of all. And to recognize that is important. It is a form of recognition. It is a form of thanks. For example, in the tafsir, what it says is that, and it's a harsh lesson, but a harsh lesson is sometimes well learned. And Allah sometimes teaches his beloved ones harsh lessons too. We see the beloved companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and who is to say how much they are loved by Allah? One cannot imagine. But we see Hazrat Ammar Yasir, and we see Hazrat Ammar Yasir is sitting with Amir al-Mu'mineen, or rather standing, and he goes to sit. And what he is going to sit on is some type of chair. And as he is bending down to sit on it, it leans back and he ends up falling to the floor and hitting his forehead, and blood starts gushing out from his forehead. He stands up, and of course after this it is said that he always did this with his actions, because Hazrat Ammar's level of attainment towards the end of his life was a very high level of iman, one that perhaps it is very difficult to see nowadays. Having that level of iman, that spirituality, that level of ilm. So what we see is he stands up astounded. Amir al-Mu'mineen looks at Hazrat Ammar and says, "Oh Ammar, do you know why this happened?" Ammar says, "Master, enlighten me, please." He said, "You did not say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim before you sat down." And so he says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, sits down. Amir al-Mu'mineen takes his hand, puts it on Hazrat Ammar's forehead, and then the bleeding stops immediately, but the lesson is learned. So this habit of saying Bismillah before we do everything is so essential. And what it does is it's a form of shukr. It's a form of acknowledgement. We know that Thanksgiving just passed by. And as Thanksgiving passed by,
sorry to interrupt, Maulana Sahib. Is there a way to make this maximize the screen? It appears people watching on YouTube are having a little bit difficulty to read the font.
Oh, I see. Okay, so, well, I might have to, I'm sharing on Mac screen right now. This is the way I usually share the PowerPoint. Perhaps the font I'd have to make bigger on the original PowerPoint. Let me see what else I can do. One moment. Okay, so what if I stop that? Okay, so what if I just, okay, one moment. I won't put on the PowerPoint slideshow. With the PowerPoint slideshow, I don't know if I have that, let me see if I have that functionality. Would I be able to, sorry, I'm a little, not quite an expert on this. All right, let me just see this. Can I, okay, how's that? I think that will work. One moment, let me share that again. Sorry, I didn't even know I could do that. See, as human beings, sometimes we don't realize our own abilities and powers. And that's why we have to know ourselves, or at least know your PowerPoint presentation. Is this better, Yunus Bhai?
I think this is definitely a...
This is what it was, I think. And now
yeah.
we come to here. Okay, it's because of my...
So much. This is much better, sir, than before.
Okay. Jazakallah for your valuable feedback and not for suffering through not seeing.
No, because I had to go and bring my specs, reading specs to read that thing. But this one is better, huh? This one is better, sir. Perfect.
Jazakallah. So, thank you. So we begin all beginnings. And how are we beginning beginnings? We are beginning them with Bismillah. Thanksgiving just passed. And one of the things we learn in Thanksgiving is to give shukr. And shukr is given by acknowledgement. And so acknowledgement of the source is important. When we say thank you, it is simply a matter of acknowledging, you know. And when someone gives us something, we accept it. When we accept it, how do we accept it? We see the act of someone giving us a gift, and as they present us the parcel that has been beautifully wrapped in a bag and a bow and whatnot, we hold it and it comes into our possession. So the gift that is given to you by another person, as it comes into your possession, you call it a gift. Why do you call it a gift? Well, because you did not work for this. So therefore, if I did not work for this, I did not do anything for it. Therefore, it is something that you are giving me out of your grace. Now, if you have given it to me out of your grace, I accept it. If I take the gift and walk away, then I am not acknowledging your grace. And therefore, the parent will say to the child, did you not say thank you? And so you will turn around and say thank you. And when you turn around and say thank you, what you are doing is you are acknowledging the grace of the other person. So now you become someone who is gracious. You are accepting it with grace. If you accept something and take it and use it and move on, that is thanklessness. And when you accept something and you thank somebody, you yourself are accepting it with grace. So it shows inside of you there is iman. And that is because, interestingly, things are known by its opposite. The opposite of shukr, as in the Quran, has been mentioned as in a very interesting way, because one would think of the opposite of shukr as thanklessness. Things are known by their opposites. For example, what is the opposite of iman? We say it is kufr. What is the opposite of zulm? We say it is nur, and so on. So what is the opposite of shukr? Interesting, the Quran uses in one verse the opposite of shukr as kufr. Kufr. So we become ghafir when we are not being shakir. So this means that we have to thank. But when we thank, what we do is we accept, and we accept with grace. And kufr means to deny. So if you get a gift from somebody and you deny them, you say, no, this was not because of you. You didn't give it to me. Then we are being thankless. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we say Allah is giving us something, it is not usually like someone comes and hands you something. It comes through other means. He gives to us through means. He teaches us to donate in charity in a way that our other hand doesn't know, and not to flaunt it and advertise it. He also is latif. He is giving you everything you have. Even the ability to thank him is given by him. With each breath you thank him, and you need that breath from him to thank him, so you must thank him for the breath that you needed to thank him. So we are thanking him for thanking him, and therefore it is endless in his shukr. And so all beginnings and everything must begin with the knowledge that it is Allah that is the true source of everything, and acknowledging him with grace is shukr. And then we implement it in action by taking everything he gives us and using it in the way that he has dictated, he has guided. So when he guides us and we use every blessing he gives us the way he prefers it, that is shukr. If I'm using it to indulge in sin, if I'm using it to indulge in zulm, I'm using it to do things that are not desired by him, then that is kufr also. Without denying him, we can deny him. So moving on, and because I do want to stop in a certain frame of time, there were some things here that we discussed yesterday. I will move past those. Bila rawiyatin ajalaha. So here what we see is bila, without, and not, or without, rawiyatan, which is reflection. This is where we think. This is where we are pondering. This is something that is highly recommended to us. So it is recommended that we ponder. It is recommended that we think. It is recommended that we reflect. But that does not mean that it is something that he does. Rather, it is a mechanism that he has created for us. Amir al-Mu'mineen, by indicating these words, they're very powerful because they are showing us what Allah did not do at the time of creation. To know that is definitely incredible and mind-blowing and beyond my understanding, which is why one can look at this and say that this person who is saying this would have been present at that time, or would have had great knowledge of how it was happening. And to know that Allah did not reflect and think, that's incredible. Me as a human being in my limited capacity, I can barely understand my own thinking, understand the thinking of the people around me. Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying there is no pondering here. Now, I know everything in myself through pondering. So when I am thinking, there is a process in my mind, a chain of thoughts. We cannot apply that to Allah in our concept of Allah, and that he is reflecting and pondering. Reflecting and pondering means that we do not immediately have the answer. Reflecting and pondering means that we have to go through analyze various situations to try and predict the outcome, and therefore decide what is the best course of action. Reflection and pondering would not be for him, for he is in infinite knowledge. Can I actually understand that? Again, by default, I know that because I am the one who must ponder, he does not. But he has made it for us as a beautiful way, a means for us to understand things. So reflection and pondering is highly recommended. And that's the greatest action you will commit. One moment of thought, it is said in hadith, one moment of thought is better than 1,000 years of ibadat. In Al-Qafi, in the Bab of Aql, when it comes to using your intellect to ponder upon creation, upon Allah's creation, then this is considered better than 1,000 years of worship. That is really quite amazing, because we know how important worship is. This is not belittling worship. This is showing us the esteemed status of thinking. Allah shows us the value of things by comparison. So when we see things enumerated, we understand their value. That's the way our minds work. When the sign says there'll be a $10,000 fine for one who is going to smoke outside this building or here in this area, one might say that seems a little excessive. You're going to charge them $5,000 for one smoke that they had. Indeed, it's a negative thing. It will cause damage, but it seems like the fine that could put somebody into debt, make them homeless. That could cause lots of problems. So is that really justice? Is that fair? But the idea is that it is not about an eye for an eye here. Rather, it is about implementing a hefty fine to deter. It is a deterrent. With that number, we get a big idea of how much this is disliked over here with that big fine. When we say 1,000 times 1,000 years of worship, that is not to say, oh, worship's not important, this is 1,000. It is to say worship is very important. It's the reason behind why Allah created the universe. Everything worships him in a different way. To worship him is the highest act that we can do in our existence, that allows us to achieve the higher status of our existence. There is great honor, there is great grace of his and mercy in worship. However, as important as it is, as mandatory as it is, reflection is 1,000 times, 1,000 years times better than a moment of worship. You see, in 1,000 years, how many moments of worship are there? There's a lot of moments of worship in 1,000 years and one moment of reflection. So therefore, again, that is, again, just to try and justify our topic of Ma'rifat Tawheed, which we are spending some time on. It is highly beneficial for us to ponder, definitely. Okay, now I did not get through all of the phrases as I had wanted to, but I might not be guilty, hopefully, of going too fast this time. I will continue because there's very important discussion there. However, at this point, I'd like to spend a little bit of time now, and let's take a look at some interesting hadith. This is hadith number 2 from Nahjul Balagha itself. So this is also, and the first one I just skipped over for the moment because I wanted to talk about this one. That one will come up a little later. It's a very different topic, but this one has more to do with us and what we are doing. Amir al-Mu'mineen as-salatu was-salamu alayhi says that azra bi nafsihi, and that means that he devalues, he debases, he insults himself. So we have insulted our own selves. Manistashara, the one who adopts, the one who accepts, the one who, who absorbs. So that means over here, there is an element of accepting yourself, which means that you take it upon yourself. That's why it says adopts greed as a habit. You actually have to have greed in front of you and then take it within. So there's an absorption here. There's an acceptance of it. So what's happening is we devalue, we insult ourselves when we accept greed. So, the question becomes, when we talk about greed, the question becomes, what is greed in itself and how is it insulting and devaluing us? And how does it compare to other terms? For example, you see something someone has, and so you like that and you work hard and you get it yourself. We do that in life a lot. We often are motivated to work because we see a certain lifestyle, we see certain advantages of having income. So what we do is we get motivated by what we're seeing around us. And is that greed? That's not greed. A child grows up seeing that there's a certain lifestyle of people around them. They themselves want a certain type of car. I would like to drive that car. How did we get that idea? Well, we would have seen that car being driven by someone else. And same thing with the type of home we want, the type of job we want, the way we would like to live our lives. These are things that we do not invent or create. Rather, we see around us and we absorb them, and they motivate us to work hard in life. That is not greed. So, to want
45
something.
and 45 and 225 is 50.
to desire something, there is a line, and we need to understand what greed in itself is, and where is the boundary, and when do we enter into greed. So that is one thing, and that's what I'll focus on today, greed. I'll go to another hadith for greed, but let's just finish this up. And so we see it says, وَرَضِيَ بِالذُّلِّ وَرَضِيَ. And that means, radi is like when you are pleased with something. So that's why the translation says agrees to. You actually are pleased with it in a way. You have willingly accepted it. And what have you willingly accepted? وَرَضِيَ بِذُلِّ مَنْ كَشَفَ عَنْ ضُرِّهِ. The one who kashafa, who makes known, who manifests, who makes obvious, who tells someone عَنْ ضُرِّهِ, of his hardships. So that's interesting, because hardships are something that we often will complain about. And complaining about them is, in some ways, sometimes we do it because we share our burdens and it lightens our burdens. Sometimes we do it because it is heavy and stressful on our mind and it helps us. It's therapeutic. Sometimes we do it because we want to seek advice. Now that is different. But when we are doing it in the sense to complain to other people that, look, oh, my life is hard, then what we're doing is basically we are complaining about tests that Allah has put before us. So our intentions in the complaint are important. And if our intentions are just to, object to some of the things that has happened to us, maybe they were, if they were our own faults, then who are we objecting to? And if they are predestined or things that were out of our control and things that are tests from Allah, then why are we objecting? Rather, why are we not trying to give the tests? In our objecting, we are suggesting there is a burden He has put upon us that is more than we can tolerate. So now we are suggesting and objecting to His adl. So if we understand He will not put upon us any burden that we cannot tolerate, that is not good for us, that would not benefit us in some way, like the teacher that trains the student with hardships and examinations that makes their lives difficult, and they complain, but they come out better and stronger. So Allah is training us. This is a training ground for us, and we are being trained by Him every moment of the day. That is important to realize His will, His power, His authority over us. Even though He is hidden, He is implementing through His power many of the things that are happening around us. So therefore, a sudden phone call from somebody suddenly needs your help, something comes up that you don't want to do, but you have to do now, an obligation. Many of these things that are thrown at you out of the blue are tests in your life. And every moment of your life, He is watching you to see how you will react. For Him, it is not that this person wants to help you, this person needs your help, but you're in a hurry, you don't have time for them. He is not seeing your powers and abilities, if you have the power to help Him or not. He is seeing if you will be patient, if you will care for the one in front of you, if you will sacrifice your own time or what your own desire and plan was for this sudden objective that has come up in front of you, and that you will not say, well, this was not part of my daily plan, I don't have time for this, make an appointment with me. He is testing you to see how you will react. Many times you suddenly react with patience, and then you will find that actually the person didn't need your help with anything. It was just they were calling for a different reason. There's so many examples, and it's hard to give all of them, but it's something that perhaps you may see in your own lives and observe when you're looking around you, And this disclosing of hardship, Hazrat Yusuf, it was not liked by Allah that Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam even told the one who was leaving the prison that when you go and you see the Pharaoh, just remind him that I am Yusuf and I am still in jail. Allah wanted him to be asking Allah only. Sometimes we are helped by Allah by other means, so there are means for those who are coming to help us. Allah will help you by a medium, but you must ask the ultimate source. The ultimate source will be asked, then you go to the mediums. So we have to always recognize the ultimate source. This again links us to thankfulness. So therefore, the habit of disclosing your hardships, unless it is to, ease the burdens of stress on our mind, or unless it is to seek advice, it may end up working in our disadvantage, but rather to disclose your hardship to Allah, to speak to Him, to communicate with Him. That will put you into His grace and mercy. And of course, He is the one who will ease our burdens, whether it is through any means. And sometimes if you think about hardship, in our nature, He has put in us, we see and we observe as well, and there's a tendency for it. And the tendency is, the tendency is that we will see that we are not remembering Him as much in times of happiness than in times of sadness. When we are happy, in times of thankfulness, we remember Him less. In times of hardship, we remember Him more. Do we see that that is why He has created means of closeness to Him? Some of His slaves, He says, will remember Him when they are in a state of thankfulness. But He has said in a hadith Qudsi, as mentioned in the tafsir of Imam al-Hasan al-Askari, as-salatu was-salamu alayh, where He has said that I have given in my beings, Hazrat Adam, at that time for this hadith. It's a long story, but I'm just taking one point out of it. Hazrat Adam is looking at all of these souls, the ruh of all of the offspring that are to be born after. And as he looks at them, he notices they are all of different brightness and light and shape and size. And he says, Hazrat Adam alayhi salam says to Allah, he says, "Oh Allah, my offspring are not even, they are not equal. I see in them different distributions of wealth and so on, and life and health." And he says, if you made them all the same, then we wouldn't be fighting. But I think they're going to fight now. And Allah says that, and that's true in a way, if you look at it, many of our wars are because of this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Oh Adam, you do not know me, my creation, like I know my creation. And I know that some of my creation will come closer to me when they are in illness. Some will come closer to me when they are in health. Some will come closer to me when they are rich. Some will come closer to me when they are poor. Some with a short life, some with a long life, some with difficulties, some with ease." And it goes on. So we see that Allah through these means is bringing us into His proximity. A hardship that He puts upon us is a mercy from Him if it brings us closer to Him. If anything in my day causes me to remember Allah, that is probably the greatest gift He will give me. So we do not look at hardship as hardship or ease as ease, but rather as means of closeness to Him. That is why when the man said, and I'm sorry, one hadith comes out after another, and I'm probably going to lose myself. So I'll just move on. I'll pause that thought for now, which I usually don't do, but just to complete this. And I'd like to talk about at-tama'a a bit, and to continue this hadith, but there may be a little shortage of time. So in respect for your time, I will apologize, but I do have, hopefully, inshallah, the opportunity to continue this on the next Sunday. So there are some things here that I want to talk about, but what I'll do is I'll just come over here for a moment, because I'd like to leave us with an interesting dua and implementation. In our prayers, often we forget which rak'ah we are in. I mean, it can happen to anybody. It's happened to me, certainly, and it's something that we struggle with, train ourselves with. There are certain, you could say, actions I do, or a certain frame of mind we want to be in, or certain ways of approaching our salah that enable us to try and focus more. But there is a certain element of autopilot in our salah where we can forget. And so what happens is, in Al-Kafi volume 3, in the bab of forgetfulness in salah, it's narrated. And what is narrated here is that it says that somebody came and complained. What did they say? And it says that, and Imam Jafar as-Sadiq, as-salatu was-salamu alayhi, I am at my time to end. Forgive me for the extra 2 minutes. Imam Jafar as-Sadiq, as-salatu was-salamu alayhi, says that a man came to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. O Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, I complain to you of what I face from uncertainty during my salah, to the extent that I do not know what I prayed from an increase or a decrease. Have I prayed more or less than what I am thinking? Am I in this rak'ah? Am I in this rak'ah? And so he says, when you enter into salah, So stab your left thigh with your right finger. So as we are entering into it, we are on the Jan Namaz, we are about to raise our hands for Iqama, we are about to raise our hands for Takbir, we are about to begin, right forefinger, stab meaning that push it into the left thigh, and recite this dua. Bismillahi wa billahi wa tawakkaltu ala Allahi. A'udhu billahi as-sami'ul alim min ash-shaytanir rajim. Something that people often know as a phrase and they often say. So something that you would want to maybe take a snapshot of if you don't remember this. And this can be the beginning of our concentration in Salah. The benefits are gained when we're concentrating, of course, and we attain a state of mind that we never forget which rak'ah we are in, or at least most of the time we don't, except for exceptional circumstances? Certainly. Can we do it in exceptional circumstances? Indeed, we can. When you see people on the plains of Karbala, and you see over here it says Bismillah ar-Rahman, فَإِنَّكَ تَنْحَرُهُ وَتَطْرُدُهُ. So you would slaughter and repel him. And that means Iblis. That means that the reason why we do this is Iblis is doing waswasa, and he can cause forgetfulness, so you are protecting yourself from him. So therefore we see then from this that it is possible. I ponder often. I ponder upon the people who prayed in Karbala. And I ponder upon the people who prayed